speaking of foreign policy and whatever, this Afghanistan thing. What's your thoughts?
Deep breath.
A lot of shit. 20 years worth of shit.
I mean, when we first met, one of the biggest, you couldn't escape it. Everyone had an opinion about the war. I mean, America was still in a collective PTSD and the collective shock over September 11th, even a few years later. I mean, we met in 2004, but it was like two and a half years after that, because we met in early 2004.
Yeah, late 03, early 04. Yeah.
America had just gone to war with Iraq. Afghanistan had already been going on, and then it was still so fresh. And I remember being such an anti-war guy that I wanted us out, but a part of me didn't think that the Afghan mission was bad because of what we could do. But then knowing American foreign policy, and this is regardless of your political views, I am not ashamed of my liberal political views, but I've always thought American foreign policy, regardless of who was in charge, was just atrocious. We faltered over so many things and we get so many things wrong. Our American military complex, the military industrial complex is so big. This is one of those things where it's just so large as a business model that there's too many chains to get up. Whenever you're trying to build a nation, whenever you're trying to establish stability in a nation, you can't have something to be this big. It needs to be small. It needs to be concentrated. It needs to be focused, and an idea needs to be front and center. That's where America failed in Afghanistan. I think, and to an extent, the whole world failed Afghanistan too.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. I know that the Taliban has said that this is going to be different. I don't trust them. No one does. I think they're absolute piles of vermin. I wouldn't trust anything that they say. I mean, that's one thing I think the whole rest of the world agrees on, even Afghanis. Unless you are in the Taliban, you're just a pile of vermin. I mean, no, sorry, that came out wrong. It's the opposite. Like everyone, they are the vermin of the world. They're
right.
I don't get it. I mean, this guy who's now leading the country, who was pardoned, by the way, last year by the United States under Trump's administration, and was given validation by being able to travel now and to sit as a member of now a group that was recognized by the United States. And Donald Trump said that if there's going to be peace in Afghanistan or the future of it, and I was like, actually, if there was going to be peace in Afghanistan, it was the United States. It was a Western presence there. And I know this guy has said that he's still okay with having Western journalists in his country, reporting objectively about what's happening in Afghanistan. I don't believe that. That he wants women in his country to be educated. I don't believe that. He wants his country to be a developed country. Interestingly, I don't believe that. I hope he proves me wrong.
Of course, we all want to be proved wrong.
I hope he proves me wrong, because a lot of people deserve better.
Of course.
Regardless of my views about America's presence around the world in our American military complex, I think anyone who's a member of the armed services, not just from the United States, but from any other country that was there, from other Western countries that were there, and knowing what they lost, knowing what we lost. I know Afghan veterans. You know Afghan veterans. I know people that didn't make it back. They deserve this. That's it. And if we're mad at what's happening now, I think we're all still pretty upset. But if this guy actually, if we all get proven wrong, then okay, that's at least what they deserve more than anything else.
Let me ask you this: the Joe Biden is withdrawing, pull the plug.
We didn't win this war, Ernest. We were never going to win this war. We never won this war. The United States never had full control of Afghanistan. There was so much infighting within and so much corruption within the government that was elected by the Afghan people, that was, and again, endorsed by the American, like people around the world saw this. This is the American puppets. It's easy for people to have these views. Then, now in hindsight, what are we going to see? What are we going to see 5 years from now, 10 years from now? We're going to have another conversation about it. That Afghan government was not good. They weren't stable. Yes, people voted for them. They were absolutely destructive and corrupt, even to the very end. They were calling each other out on these things. The elected president of Afghanistan fled on the day of the Taliban. Before the Taliban even reached Kabul, he was already on a flight to Uzbekistan, and then he ended up in now he's in the United Arab Emirates.
Right.
Karzai stayed. The guy who ran against him called them both cowards. It's like now he's gonna have to go sit with the Taliban to try to negotiate. Like the Taliban is loving this because they're saying, see, in their heads, they're gonna provide a form of stability. But whatever. I don't actually believe democracy is always the best. Democracy only works when there's a level of economic stability in a country. Political scientists have been arguing this for years, and they've been publishing papers, and the numbers have always shown that it's actually true. Whenever countries hit a certain level of development and GDP development, stands at like the GDP line stands to about 14, 15 grand. I'm probably wrong on the numbers, but there's a line. Whenever you cross that line, then you can have political stability. You need economic stability first. I think if Afghanistan surprisingly becomes a very healthy, developed, middle income nation at least, what happened with the Arab Spring is going to happen in Afghanistan. After a while, people are going to say, hey, we want democracy. And it's the Taliban is now just going to be a group, even though, they're just going to be an ultra-conservative group. But if they're just going to be now just a political party in the country and they're going to try to run for a state and the people say no, all right, I'm okay with that too. We don't have to love it, but the Muslim Brotherhood won their elections in Egypt too. I don't have to love it, but that was the will of the people.
I just think, like, especially with the events of last week, there's so much intellectually dishonest, like, rhetoric stateside with both parties, but especially on the right side, I would say.
You shouldn't. Foreign policy being debated like this is hysterical because someone like me who even is a liberal can just call out liberal politicians because I know ultimately what our history is.
Right.
After the Second World War, the United States became basically the last super democracy left standing without much. We had our attack on Pearl Harbor, but here we were. And then we just basically determined what happened. There was the Truman Doctrine that happened that was born after that war that decided that we're going to pump a bunch of money in the country so long as they support democratic values. That's where we went wrong.
Right.
Right? And it doesn't matter. Yeah, Truman was a Democrat. Eisenhower came after him. He was Republican. And then, here we come. You can name all these presidents. You can name Nixon.
Nixon.
Kennedy, Nixon, Johnson,
Carter, Reagan. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. The Bushes, both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, it doesn't matter. America always trips over its own foot whenever it comes to nation building, whenever it comes to democracy. There's a great anecdote that begins Fareed Zakaria's book, The Future of Freedom. It's a brilliant book, actually about democracy. And the opening anecdote that starts the book in the introduction is about when Kazakhstan, when the Soviet Union fell apart and all these countries were starting to come to be, and these former Soviet states, Kazakhstan had invited a bunch of American representatives, elected officials, and political scientists to come and help them write a constitution and get themselves set up because they wanted to model their country like the United States. And the best part about it is everyone, like no one showed up because they said that's actually a really bad idea.
Right. No, it's fascinating because like you can argue that every administration from 2001 on, the last 6 administrations, all share responsibility.
Not Biden, wasn't Trump. I don't know if Trump making a peace deal with the Taliban was a good idea, as much as I don't know if this was, but Trump also wanted to get the troops out of Afghanistan. A lot of people wanted it out because the war wasn't going to be won. And we could go all the way back to Reagan. Hello. This is when the Taliban was born. We gave them money, man. We gave them weapons. This was the Mujahideen. These were the sects of the Mujahideen. And here they were with American weapons taking over their country twice. They've done this twice now. And yeah. And as being this vermin You know, these guys, some of these guys aren't even Afghani. That's what I don't get about this thing. It's just, it's a pretty, we'll never understand it. I mean, I don't like this argument that people also have about having like, um, well, this isn't compatible with Islam, democracy. Yes, it is. The five largest democracies in the world are Muslim countries.
Hmm.
So, five largest Muslim countries in the world, yeah, are democratic states. So yeah, I said that wrong. I meant to. That's what I meant. Five, the five largest Muslim populations are democratic states.
That's right.
So yes, it very much is. And by the way, all of those countries have democratically elected women to lead them. So it's not Islam. It's failed foreign policy. The Truman Doctrine was partially what the Truman Doctrine did was make sure that communism never ran the world. And we can fast forward all the way back, all the way from Truman all the way to Reagan to the 1980s when the Russians started to get a presence in Afghanistan because they wanted that country too. They wanted that country to be part of the USSR. In hindsight, that probably would have been the best thing that ever happened. Honestly, they would have had enough infrastructure and enough, like all of that stuff would have been built. I know they were the godless Soviets, but honestly, those countries aren't really that fucked up. The countries that are now part of the former Soviet, they're really not that bad. Um, Interestingly enough, that's where the Afghans, the first places they started to fly to were to Tajikistan and to Uzbekistan. They started to go there.
Right.
So, come on, how bad are those places? But we decided to arm them. We decided to arm these rebels because they're going to fight the Soviets, and that's all part of this whole thing. It's just flood them with money. And if you've ever read Charlie Wilson's War or seen the movie, it's quite a brilliant movie. You see that famous quote from Charlie Wilson that burned in my head, and that day I repeated it um, when I saw the news. I woke up just to see that headline that the Taliban had taken Kabul. Was the Charlie Wilson's quote was, we did everything right, but we really fucked up the end game. And that was in regards to the 1980s because he was the congressman responsible for getting the Mujahideen armed. He was the one who did it. And there it is. There's that quote. There's that quote once again, just searing in my head. Yeah, we fucked up the end game again. We never gave Afghanistan a chance, ultimately, and not just the United States, the whole West, the whole Western world did it. We never gave them a chance. We never gave them any hope. We never gave them I don't think we completely validated them. We never let them actually build themselves economically. We needed to pump a bunch of money into that. When I say we, I mean the West.
Right.
We needed to pump a whole bunch more money because that country is living off of debt. All the money, like we should have just gone full on. As much as I despise what colonialism did, it should have just been a full on colonial state for. It would have been for 10 years. They would have built that country. They would have gotten it. They would have crossed that line. Jobs. They needed to find something to get people to work, do things. Because whenever you earn your own money, whenever you can start earning your own property, you'll be damned if the Taliban ever is going to come in and try to take that away from you. Because that's all people want is they want hope. I don't think the Taliban is the answer to that. But, I said that's one thing I always want to see personally. This SOB who's running the country now, I hope he proves the whole world wrong. He won't, but I hope he proves us all wrong.
Right.